This is a video to run through the 2.10 close viewing internal as it is being done in 12NF this year. So the basics of this internal is that it is a level 2 version of an internal which you would have done last year. The idea behind it is that you watch closely a scene from your film and look for the techniques that the director is using, discuss how they are used, how they work together, how they create meaning, and how they explore the director's purpose. It is a scene that will not have been studied in an intensive manner in class. You end up writing a report, so you use a grid, which I'll show you shortly, and you use the information from that grid to fill in sentence starters to write a report. The basics of the assessment criteria are here. So if you are aiming for an achieved grade, what you'll need to do is analyse the visual or verbal film techniques that are used, and you will need to discuss those in detail. So you will need to look at how those film techniques help to show character, setting, ideas, messages, those sort of things. And to do that, you'll also need to reference those techniques in some detail, which means describing exactly what the technique is, how it's used in that moment, and also obviously stating what the technique is. If you are aiming for a merit grade, you'll need to do the same as you did for an achieved, but you need to talk about how those aspects, which are the film techniques, are working together to create meaning. So how the use of close-up is also accompanied by the use of soundtrack, for example, and how that helps to build your understanding of Andy's character, for example. So you need to really be focusing on how multiple techniques are working together in a moment to show an idea. If you're aiming for excellence, what you will be required to have is offering more insightful reflections on how those techniques work together and then the intended effect and what that helps to show. So you'll need to unpack the director's purpose in a much more detailed manner. So this will be thinking not just how they used a mid-shot or a close-up and soundtrack to show Andy's character, but then why they've done it, for what reason and what commentary or what ideas or messages are being conveyed through that process. The model timeline for this at this stage is that you'll be doing practice work and starting the assessment in week 9 and then starting the assessment in week 10. You'll be doing some form of drafting in week 10 and then in week 1. You will have some form of draft due by the end of week 1 to be able to give the teacher for feedback. You'll continue working on it in week 2 and it will be submitted at the beginning of week 3. So ultimately you have 2 weeks at the beginning of next term for most of the core amount of work to be done. The video clips will be in Teams and then can be accessible at any point. So there is a possibility for you, an opportunity if you need to catch up to be doing it out of class time. The sort of things that you're looking for in terms of film techniques are things like the shots, camera shots, the camera angles, the camera movement, the use of verbal or sound techniques, along with things that I've classified as other here. So you might be looking at facial expression, set design, costuming, focus of the camera, lighting, composition of the shot, etc. So there are a huge range of film techniques, as you can see here. You'll be focusing on 3 moments of the scene, and you'll be looking for at least 2 film techniques in each moment of the scene. So you'll cover at least 6 film techniques over the course of your report. So as mentioned before, to recap for you, you'll be looking at how the techniques create the effect, how that technique is creating the effect, and then why it's created that effect, how it works with other techniques, and then from there, what that helps us think or feel. And that's the director positioning us or making us think. This is an example here of a achieved paragraph, and you would be doing approximately 3 of these in your report. So this one here, it has an aspect used by the director is a mid-shot, and they have said the effect of that mid-shot is to show the conflict between the character of Chris and the character of Dean in the film Get Out. They've then described what is seen in the shot, and then they help to explain it, which is the bits that are in yellow. So you can see that they're explaining that The shot helps to show the action of both characters and how there was a change. And then they look at another technique, which was symbolism, and they've described that symbolism, and then they've explained the effect there. Even though Chris didn't save the deer can save him. So they've referenced the wider text and created a connection between this moment and another moment in the film. They've then continued to explain and explore the ideas that they've got there. And then at the end of that paragraph, they've tried to unpack the director's purpose, which is how they think the character has changed from the beginning to this part in the scene. So they've referenced all the parts that they need to, the techniques, they've got the effect of those techniques, they've attempted to describe how they work together, they just haven't been as successful, and as a result, it doesn't reach merit or excellence. The process that you will have will be filling in a grid like this. Most of you will be doing this in week 10, but some of you may get round to doing it in week 1. The more detailed you do this, the easier the write-up part becomes. You'll be filling these in and you will do 3 of these. So you will focus on 3 moments of your scene, 3 things that happen, what those things help to show, for example, character, setting, idea or theme, and then you'll be looking at the techniques that help to build our understanding in that moment, and that's what's going to go in here. So obviously you can pause these at any point to have an idea or a better look at what they are. So these can be done in a really detailed manner, which makes it a lot easier to write the report, or if you're feeling confident, you may find that you just use bullet points for this part. This is an example of a very detailed one that has been filled in using the example of Brooks's scene in The Shawshank Redemption. So as you can see, the film technique identified as dialogue, and then they have described when the dialogue is said, who says the dialogue, and exactly what the dialogue is, so they have quoted it. Then they have identified another technique, which is a mid-shot, and they have described what is in the mid-shot. Then they have talked about facial expressions, which is a 3rd technique, and then they have talked about focus, which is a 4th technique. They have written here the ideas that it helps to show and an explanation of those multiple techniques together, and then some notes for the director's purpose. So those will make a very detailed example, which would then work into a paragraph. The paragraphs can be done using these templates, which will be in the booklet. So you fill in the booklet, which obviously if you can look at the colours a little bit, you'll see that some of the colours here match up to the same colours in this booklet here in the sentence starters. So you take the same information from the coloured parts and then put them into the other part, and you're wanting to explain those. So you'll do an introduction, which has a template, a conclusion, which has a template, and then you will do 3 of these paragraphs. So most of this work will be done towards the end of week 1 and during week 2. And ultimately this will be due in week 3. This is a really detailed example of how those sentence starters work, and I won't read through all of that, but this is available which you can pause and have a read through it. So this is a paragraph which would be looking at more a merit or excellence end compared to that first paragraph, and the reason for that is more detail, more reflection, and a greater depth or insight with those details. So hopefully that helps you have a little bit of clarity and a little bit of awareness of how the internal works, and then any further questions you can ask your teacher.